Affirmative action and the Supreme Court, that is the topic of tonight's byline. How should we choose our judges in this country? Should we look for the best legal minds, the sharpest lawyers to pass down rulings? Or should we be looking to make sure we have the right number of women on the court, the right number of francophones, the right number of minorities? Canada's Chief Justice Beverly McLaughlin believes there should be gender parity on the Supreme Court. At least that's what she told Peter Mansbridge from the state broadcaster.
A new appointment made just yesterday by the Prime Minister to the court, which brings the balance 6-3, remains at 6-3 between men and women. Does that gender balance concern you?
I'm all in favor of gender parity.
You're being very diplomatic in the way you answer that.
There are so many things wrong with this idea. First off, it puts merit and the mind of the judge's head below what sits beneath their robes. Genitals matter more than gray matter. Considering the important cases the Supreme Court hears, the precedents they set, I'd rather we have 9 sharp legal minds on the bench, and quite frankly, I don't care if they are men or women. This is an issue because people like Peter Mansbridge and other members of the chattering classes are upset that Prime Minister Stephen Harper made an appointment to the Supreme Court this week, and he appointed a man, not a woman. After other appointments, there have been hand-wringing over whether this appointment or that appointment was from the right ethnic group. Let me tell you what happens when you decide who gets important jobs not based on merit, but on factors such as the person's race, the part of the country they come from, or their sex. You get people like José Werner in cabinet. You get people like Hedy Fry in cabinet. Neither woman would have been appointed to cabinet if they didn't tick off certain boxes, the gender box, or some regional requirement, or an ethnic requirement. Werner was completely incompetent. And Fry, well, this is the woman that stood in the House of Commons as a cabinet minister and claimed falsely that crosses were burning on lawns in Prince George, BC. Of course, no such thing ever happened. Fry shouldn't have been in cabinet, but no cabinet is ever built based on merit. It's a political process that's all about checking off the right boxes. I can point to lots of other cabinet ministers, men and women, over the years who got their jobs based on political factors rather than skill set. It's happened in liberal governments. It's happened in conservative governments. Do we want to import that system from the political sphere into the judicial sphere? Now, imagine for a minute what would happen if we did. So now we've got gender parity requirements as part of the system. And in one day, we've got 5 women and 4 men on the court, and one of the men retires. But at that point, it turns out all the best candidates are women, meaning we would have 6 women and 3 men on the bench. Should all the women that are qualified be passed over to make sure a man is in that spot? If you don't think that could happen, then ask around. Who's in law school? Who's graduating from law school these days? Women are in the majority there. This kind of thinking says that women can only get ahead if we give them special treatment is so outdated. It's not what I teach my daughters. It's not what my wife teaches my daughters. We don't tell them, you can do anything you want, sweetie, as long as there's an affirmative action program there to give you a leg up. No, we don't tell them that. I'm sorry, Ms. McLaughlin, but your age is showing if you think that women need special treatment to get ahead in Canada in this day and age. It is outdated thinking from a past generation. And let me also ask what other conditions we would be putting on the court if we allow this idea to go forward, because it won't stop here. You can easily imagine that activists would demand that we have a certain number of spots for visible minorities. And then you can imagine the fighting over which ethnic group would get to lay claim to those spots. What about sexual orientation? Do we need to have certain judges, certain positions just set aside for gays or lesbian in the courts? I say no to all of this. Let's judge people by their skills, not their gender. Let's judge people not based on what special interest group they represent, but instead, let's judge them based on the content of their character. And that's the byline.
Some pointed remarks today from the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And they come a day after Stephen Harper nominated Marc Nadon to the court, the 5th male justice in a row the Prime Minister has named.
CBC keeping score. Of course, they're not the only ones. Elise Mills joins us now. She's a political commentator in Vancouver and a regular contributor. And Elise, your thoughts on this? Should it matter if we're talking about a man or a woman on the court, or do we look for the best person?
Well, isn't justice supposed to be blind, Brian? That's my thought. Yes, I agree. I was listening to your opening monologue, and I agree with every point you've made. I think if we look specifically even at the Senate, we can see how when we choose based upon cultural or gender designations, things sometimes can go terribly wrong. What we need to look at is their previous decisions they've made, their critical thinking skills, and their background in their profession. I think that's simply the three things that we're looking at. I understand, and I've had obviously a few responses from key feminists across the country this morning when I suggested that I didn't believe in gender parity at the Supreme Court. They suggested that I was one of those women out of a certain age that was eating off the buffet that they had provided. I totally disagree. I think every society matures and evolves and changes, and I agree with what you're saying. This point of view is really stuck in the 60s and 70s, which I would be, considering the dark ages of feminism.
I mean, we're going to be accused of ageism now for saying that, but it is from a different generation.
It is.
I don't hear these things from women, and I'll admit I'm middle-aged. I know everyone keeps calling Justin Trudeau a young man, and we're exactly the same age. But let's face it,
he's
we're middle-aged.
He's youngish.
But so for people middle-aged and younger, this makes no sense. It's for people that are much older, like Beverly McLaughlin, that they're saying, okay, well, this is the only way to get ahead, that women can get ahead. I don't think it is. Not today.
I absolutely disagree, and one of the key points the feminists are bringing up, and I think that the other concern I have is that we're dividing women from feminists and women that are proud to be female. I mean, it seems to be a bizarre divide there. But what their suggestion is that women think differently. Their critical thinking skills are different. There's more emotional intelligence attached to it, supposedly. My concern there is that that's not actually the role for a justice to take on. The role of the justice is to look at the precedent, the issue at hand. It isn't to have a warm and fuzzy feeling attached to it, I don't believe. I think emotional intelligence, though, can expand to more thoughtfulness, but I don't see how a man, Brian, is not able to achieve that. And I also like your point that really what we're looking at is my generation and the generation coming up getting into positions in their careers in the legal profession where they would be able to be appointed. And, I think that's something to really think about. Again, I think these feminists are underestimating Canadians. They're underestimating the ability of our young women. Give them a chance.
How many women run provinces in this country right now?
Exactly.
Christy Clark, Alison Redford, Kathy Dunderdale, Pauline Marois, Kathleen Wynne. The majority of the provinces, I think, are, or at least half, I'm trying to do math as we speak. I just thought of this, being run by women. The majority of the Canadian population, at the least, live in provinces run by women. That was not done through affirmative action. That was, well, other than Kathleen Wynne, that was done by Canadian people at the ballot box. This glass ceiling, I think, in most places has been shattered. If there's institutional ways that it's still there, let's get rid of that. But I don't think that we need to be setting aside certain seats. Of course, some people think we should be doing that in Parliament. 20 seconds left. Should we do that in Parliament, Elise?
Absolutely not. From every industry, change has happened. It's still continuing. Do not force companies or institutions, government or otherwise, to put forward some sort of haphazard version of the affirmative action plan that failed so miserably in the United States. It's skill, Brian. Bottom line.
All right. Sounds good. We'll talk soon, Elise.
Thank you, Brian.
Email me your thoughts. Do we need to do affirmative action? Get people like Hetty Fry in the Supreme Court? Byline@sunmedia.ca.